You're standing by the glass at an aquarium, watching a group of seals glide effortlessly through the water. Everything feels calm until one of them suddenly pops up, lifts its flippers, and starts slapping them together. Clap, clap, clap. People around you laugh, someone points, a kid gets excited, and the seal keeps going, almost like it knows exactly what it's doing. But here's the strange part. That movement looks way too familiar. It doesn't look random, it doesn't look accidental, it looks intentional, almost like applause. And that raises a weird question that most people never stop to think about. Why would a seal clap in the first place? If you enjoy these kinds of simple questions that turn into surprisingly deep answers, make sure to subscribe and leave a like, because things are about to get more interesting than they seem. Because here's the surprising truth. Seals aren't clapping to celebrate anything. They're not applauding, and they're definitely not trying to act like humans. What you're seeing is something much older, much more instinctive, and a lot more important for their survival. Most people assume animals copy human behavior when they do something that looks familiar. It's a natural reaction. We see ourselves in everything. But this is where most people get confused. Seals were doing this long before humans ever watched them behind glass. In the wild, especially underwater, seals rely heavily on sound, not just hearing, producing sound. Because underwater, vision is limited, light fades quickly, and distances become harder to judge. Sound, on the other hand, travels faster and farther in water than in air. So when a seal brings its flippers together and creates that sharp clap, it's not random noise, it's a signal, a very deliberate one. In fact, some species of seals, particularly male gray seals, use powerful claps underwater as a way to communicate dominance. Yes, dominance. Instead of fighting physically all the time, which wastes energy and risks injury, they use sound to send a message. I'm strong enough. Stay away. And here's what surprises most people. These claps can be incredibly loud underwater, much louder than you would expect from such a simple movement. To another seal, that sound isn't cute, it's intimidating. It's like a warning shot without the fight. And suddenly that playful-looking clap doesn't feel so playful anymore. But that's only part of the story, because not all clapping behavior comes from the wild. What you see in aquariums and marine parks often looks different, more frequent, more exaggerated, and sometimes timed perfectly with human reactions. And that's where things start to blur. Because seals are also extremely intelligent animals, they learn patterns quickly, they notice cause and effect, and most importantly, they notice attention. If a seal claps its flippers and people react, laugh, point, get excited, that reaction becomes a reward. Even without food, even without training, attention itself is enough. So over time, that natural behavior can shift. It can become something else, something repeated not for survival, but for interaction. And this is where many people get it wrong again. They think the seal is performing in a human sense, but it's not thinking I'm entertaining them, it's thinking something much simpler. When I do this, something happens. That's it. No ego, no intention to impress, just learned association. And that makes the behavior even more fascinating, because the same action, clapping, can mean completely different things depending on the context. In the wild, it's a signal of strength. In captivity, it can become a learned response. Same movement, completely different purpose. And if you look closely, you can actually tell the difference. Wild clapping tends to be more forceful, often underwater, and tied to specific situations like mating season or territorial disputes. Captive clapping, on the other hand, is often more visible, more frequent, and happens in response to people. But here's where it gets even deeper.
Because here's the part most people never even consider. Clapping isn't really about the movement. It's about what the movement creates. When a seal brings its flippers together underwater, it generates a sharp pressure wave, a burst of sound that cuts through the ocean in a very specific way. And underwater, that matters more than anything you can see. Light disappears quickly beneath the surface. Colors fade, shapes blur. But sound? Sound travels nearly 5 times faster in water than in air. So instead of relying only on sight, seals evolved to speak in a medium that actually works in their environment. And this is where things get even more surprising. That clap isn't just loud, it's precise. Researchers studying gray seals found that these claps produce short, powerful pulses, almost like acoustic signatures. Each one carries information about size, strength, and intent. In other words, it's not just noise, it's communication. And this is where most people get it wrong again. We tend to think communication needs words, gestures, or expressions. But in the ocean, communication is physics, pressure, vibration, frequency. A single clap can say, "I'm here, I'm strong, don't come closer." And the other seal doesn't interpret it the way we interpret language. It feels it. That's a completely different way of understanding the world. Now, think about this. From our perspective, clapping is something social. It means approval, celebration, encouragement. But for seals, the exact same motion can mean the opposite: warning, territory, competition. Same action, completely different reality. And that's where the illusion breaks, because what looks playful to us might actually be serious to them. But then something interesting happens when humans enter the picture. In controlled environments like aquariums, the meaning of that clap starts to shift, not because the seal understands humans, but because it adapts to patterns. This is where most people get confused again. They assume animals either act purely on instinct or they think like humans. But the truth is somewhere in between. Seals are incredibly good at recognizing cause and effect. If a clap leads to a reaction, whether it's food, attention, or stimulation, the behavior becomes reinforced. And over time, it becomes more frequent, more visible, almost exaggerated. Not because the seal wants to entertain, but because the environment rewards the behavior. And here's what surprises most people. Even without formal training, animals will naturally repeat behaviors that create noticeable outcomes. So when a seal claps and hears laughter, sees movement, feels energy around it, that becomes feedback. And feedback shapes behavior. Slowly, subtly, but consistently. That's why a behavior that started as a survival signal can turn into something that looks like a performance. Not because its meaning changed internally, but because its function changed externally. And this reveals something bigger than just seals. It reveals how easily we project our own meanings onto the world. We see something familiar, like clapping, and we immediately assign it a human explanation: applause, joy, playfulness. But nature doesn't follow our definitions. It has its own logic, and often that logic is simpler and more efficient. A seal doesn't clap to express emotion the way we do. It claps because, in the right context, it works. It sends a message. It creates a reaction. It influences the environment. That's all it needs to do. And once you see it that way, the whole behavior stops being cute and starts being incredibly smart. So the next time you see a seal clapping, whether in a video or behind aquarium glass, you'll notice something different. You won't just see a funny human-like gesture. You'll see a signal, a tool, a piece of communication shaped by millions of years of evolution, and sometimes reshaped by human presence. And that simple question, why do seals clap, turns out to have a much deeper answer than it first seemed. Because understanding it isn't just about seals. It's about understanding how behavior, meaning, and environment are all connected, and how easily we misunderstand them when we only look from our perspective. If you enjoyed uncovering what's really behind something so simple, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this. Because sometimes the simplest things hide the most misunderstood truths.